Hello and welcome. In this episode, the Ukrainian offensive seems to pick up steam again and more war crimes being discovered. At the front south of the Oskil reservoir, we see we now have Russian reports, pro-Russian reports, that Sosnovo has fallen to the Ukrainians, and thus the Russians have evacuated Studenko. Studenko obviously is on the eastern side of the Seversky Donetsk, and as we can see here, its lines of communication go through Sosnovo. So the Russian side has no chance of defending it once Sosnovo is in Ukrainian hands. Thus, the evacuation makes perfect sense. While this in itself isn't that big of a step forward, the news further from the north are quite bigger. That is, we now have indication that very likely Kupiansk in the eastern part of the city is now under Ukrainian control as well. We have here a video from the Kraken unit. As far as I know, it's a volunteer unit from the Kharkiv region. They are here, and as we can see, we see a big chimney. Let's call it an industrial chimney. And us here with a smaller chimney as well. And that was the video itself, by the way, also shows them capturing BTR 80 or 82. I can't really see it here, the difference, but they captured some equipment and somebody geolocalized it here. This is the industrial chimney, supposedly, and this is the other chimney. So it's supposedly there. I Googled the position of it, and it would be here, exactly at this place. Here we see the industrial chimney again. This shows here is the Oskil River, so they would be not only be on the eastern side of the Oskil, but they would have Kupiansk under their control, which will then allow them to bridge the Oskil and bring over heavy weapons, tanks, armor, infantry fighting vehicles, trucks with reinforcements, with fuel, with supplies, and thus allow them to continue the offensive further unless the Russians stop them in time. It's important a little bit from another perspective too, because it is still, now they have the physical control of the rail line here and can stop Russian reinforcements, Russian transports going through Kupiansk into the direction of Severodonetsk, even though, if we are perfectly honest, that wasn't really the issue anymore. As we can see, the distances are so laughably small that a Ukrainian mortar of the smallest size would be able to shell the train line here and any train that dares to actually use it. So what we have now, it seems to be the crossing of the Oskil in a very likely point in an urban center where the Russians should have a good chance of fighting back. But as of now, I don't see this as fully confirmed. I would guess it's between 80 and 90%. If I have to give you some number, we might find out over the next day. It's interesting too that the operational pause by the Ukrainians has lasted less than a week. We will see over the next few days whether it has been short enough. As I said in the past, it would be extremely important to keep pushing after the Russians, to keep them on the run and prevent them from consolidating a defensive line. On the other hand, obviously, the demands of securing the rear areas, the demands of getting supplies and reinforcements on the front of rest for the troops is essential too. You can't, if you push too far forward in an offensive, it might be crushed by the opponent, encircled and cut off, especially once it runs out of supplies. So in this case, the operational pause was likely necessary, but the longer it takes, the more difficult it is for the Ukrainians to give the new offensive steam, because now everyone who was on the run has had on the Russian side has had a few days of chance to gain some rest, maybe sleep in a warm bed, get some warm food into his stomach, and now they had time to build trenches as well as the Russians in general having time, several days now, to bring in reinforcements to strengthen their line. Whether that was enough for them to stop the Ukrainian onslaught, that might be starting, or that seems to be starting now again. I guess we will see over the next week or two. The other big news from today is more Russian war crimes being discovered. This here is from Izium, mass graves, and what I'm not showing you here is a picture that is an exhumed body from one of those graves. What I seem to be able to see are fragments of a Ukrainian uniform. The body was underground for many months, so it's heavily decomposed, but the body seems to wear Ukrainian uniform, and what is clearly visible is that his hands were tied behind his back. That would be an indication of executed Ukrainian prisoners of war. And what we have now are the numbers here. It says 440 graves. I have another article found already where they say 500 graves. So the numbers will likely keep going up. They also found torture chambers, etc. But I don't want to get the short video not extended too long, because we have even more to say in this regard. What we have here, and this is something I also want to show you, is a tweet from a pro-Ukrainian website. You will be able to find that tweet on my Twitter account in case you really want to see it, because it shows some bodies. What the Ukrainians accuse the Russians here is executing their wounded soldiers to quicken their escape. And they put that into a direct connection with the so-called blocking detachments that are in the rumors basically since the beginning of the war, with supposedly Chechens doing that job in front of Kiev. Now, first of all, I don't really see a connection between executing your wounded and blocking detachments. Blocking detachments supposedly are there to stop desertion and to stop units from fleeing when they still have fighting capabilities. Why would you let those fleeing out but execute the wounded? The next thing is, I don't see a logical reason for the Russians to execute their wounded. To leave them behind isn't that big of a drama unless they have the most essential secret information that would give the Ukrainians the key to the whole of the Russian front line, and that seems fairly unlikely. And the next thing is, if you look on my Twitter and look at that video, you will see that the bandages, I actually can only identify 2 or 3 bandages. None of the wounds that you can see that were treated seems to be nowhere close to being strong enough to stop people from fleeing. So I don't see any reason to execute those simply for the fact that they were wounded. What we might have here, and here I need to emphasize, I am not accusing the Ukrainians of a war crime. I'm just emphasizing how difficult it is to find the accurate information and not believe too much. What we might have here might be a Ukrainian war crime, because the bodies are clearly fresh. They are at most a few days old, at least on the picture. And what we see is corpses wearing Russian uniforms. This might, in theory, be Ukrainian war crimes of Ukrainians having killed some, because the rest of the story just doesn't fit. Now, when we come to war crimes on my channel, not on the English-speaking channel, but on the German channel, I mentioned Ukrainian war crimes whenever they have been discovered. For the simple fact, I didn't mention it here because we didn't have fresh war crimes when I actually invested time into my English channel. The thing is, in war, it's normal that war crimes happen. That's a fairly sad, but the fairly sad truth. Hate builds up over months, while moral hindrances to harm somebody are reduced over months of fighting. Somebody who has already killed 10 soldiers in battle is far more likely to be willing to execute somebody than somebody who has never killed before. Then there are cases of hatred building up whenever you liberate a city and see raped civilians, murdered civilians. At some point, your hate towards the enemy is building up to a point that you start feeling justified killing them. And then there are other options too that might explain war crimes, like storming an enemy's position, taking prisoners of war. But in the process of assaulting that position, you lost 1 or 2 of your closest comrades, so you feel the need to personally enact revenge on your prisoners of war. All of these are human emotions. They are rationally understandable. They're easy to understand. But that should not be seen as an excuse. It's just an explanation why there hardly is any war without war crime. The difference is, though, how the nation to which the soldiers belong that committed the war crime, how that nation reacts. And here we see a stark difference between Ukraine and Russia. I've seen 2 videos of Ukrainian war crimes. One was for tank soldiers, 4 4 Russian tank soldiers that had been executed by Ukrainian soldiers. The other one was Ukrainian soldiers who had taken prisoners of war and were shooting them in the legs, sometimes in the kneecaps. In both cases, the Ukrainian government said they are going to investigate and then prosecute. Now, in full disclosure, I have not heard of that leading to anything after that, whether they actually did an investigation, whether they actually identified the culprits and put them in front of court, or whether that was just some lip service to satisfy the international press. I have no information about that. I'm happy to have a viewer comment and give me more information and reference to me any information that would lead further to clarify what that ended up to. So we have on one side at least a nation that is giving lip service to prosecute war criminals, and that publicly denounces them and says that's not okay. And on the other side, from the Russian side, I am not aware of a single time they admitted committing a war crime, any of their soldiers. Instead, they are usually either denying them outright or blaming the Ukrainian side, like in Bucha, where they claimed Azov soldiers had stormed Bucha and executed the civilians that were welcoming the Russians, even though the bodies were visible lying on the street on satellite pictures for days and even weeks before the Ukrainians even took back Bucha. So we see a stark difference in the government's reaction, and that's the real difference, not the fact that some criminals are among soldiers too, who would be surprised by that, but how the governments react to that. And obviously it has to be said that from what we know about war crimes, there's an immense imbalance when it comes to the amount of war crimes being committed, with Russia being far in the lead and committing regular war crimes during this war. So here again with Izium, and it's not a big surprise that there probably has happened mass murder. Bucha is to be expected to have happened all over the Russian occupied zone. That's at least what we can expect as of now, but I'll try to keep you updated here. And as said, if you know something about the Ukrainian war criminal trials and investigations towards their own soldiers, please leave a comment and let me know what you know about that. Other than that, just to remind you, this channel is only possible because of viewers like you, of the support from viewers like you. Thank you to all who already supported the channel, and if you want to support the channel, you find the means to do so in the description. Other than that, if you are watching this and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. If you watch to the end, it must be good enough that you might want to see more. Don't forget the bell button so you don't miss future videos. Please recommend the channel to friends and acquaintances to make it grow faster. Hit the like button if you liked the video, and leave a comment. What do you think if the Ukrainians might actually reach Luhansk Oblast this time now after they start crossing the Oskil, or whether the Russians will be able to stop the Ukrainian offensive fairly soon now. That's it for now. Tomorrow at 2000 Eastern, so 8 p.m., there will be the next live stream on this very channel. If I manage to find the time, I will do another video about Armenia today, because there are also some news, but unfortunately my little four-legged saboteur has damaged the first recording for this and the German channel, so I have twice the work again, as the microphone was turned up and my audience unfortunately isn't the best at lip reading. That's it for now anyways. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back.